We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
Katie, are you aware that there is a new season of Ghost Adventures right now?
No, I knew you said it was coming out, but I didn't know when that was happening. I'm very excited to hear the news.
Okay. I had really kind of hoped that you had watched it already.
Oh, no. Okay, I'm sorry.
So just last night we finished episode 2 where they go back to the Winchester house. But this time they do it to do a seance to try to communicate, not with Sarah Winchester, which would make sense because they're at the Winchester house. They do a seance to try to communicate with Harry Houdini.
Why?
because now this is true. Harry Houdini did visit the Winchester house in either the 20s after Sarah Winchester died. And so they were because they like to pretend that, because some person was there at one point in history, there's like some reason that he's going to hang out there and communicate with them and all of this shit. But it's not like Harry Houdini was even into that shit anyway.
Yeah, that always is one of the things that, there are many things about that show or about any of those shows that kind of crack me up and strain belief. But like one of them is when they go to like a nightclub. They like doing this at nightclubs where they're like, this is where like all the stars hung out in the 1950s. So they're all here as ghosts. It's like, no, why would they be hanging out at some random nightclub they went to in the 50s? Like if Elvis is around, he's probably at his house.
Yeah.
He's at his house making a peanut butter and banana sandwich. He is not at a club.
He's not at some nightclub in Vegas.
No, really, like, do you hang out at, fucking, I don't know, Disneyland or Hershey Park or fucking what? Because you've been there once? Like, come on. Is that where you want to spend the rest of your life?
Yeah, your spiritual life, where theoretically, you can go anywhere you want. But that's hilarious. Okay, so they're at the Winchester house trying to summon Harry Houdini. Cool.
Yeah. It is one of the most bonkers episodes I've seen because it involves witches.
Oh, yeah.
They have brought in witches.
What's her name?
Patty Negri.
Patty Negri is there. And then there's also Chris Day, who is a warlock. Mm-hmm. You know Chris. Okay, yeah.
I know the name. They've brought him on before. Or he's been. I've seen him somewhere on one of these shows before. Yeah.
He looks like he's cosplaying Anton LaVey.
He definitely does, He's got an Anton LaVey vibe, for sure.
Just once, I want to see somebody go ghost hunting in, like, a pink kitten sweatshirt or something like that.
I know. They're all so alternative. And, like, that's fine. I too, was an alternative dresser growing up. So, like, I'm not mad at it. But it's so funny. It's like such a type.
Yeah.
It is.
They're just they're very, very on brand. There was a lot of black in that episode.
Oh, I'm sure.
There was a lot of black. There was a lot of buckles.
Yes. Oh, buckles. I will say I love so many things about the original Ghost Hunters and Ghost Hunters International. But one of the things that I liked about it, and I guess this is actually kind of still true in the revival, is that they just wear normal clothes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, they're not trying to dress in a particular way. Like, they're just like, I have on jeans and a sweatshirt. Which makes sense because I'm going to go sit in a cold house all night.
Yeah. It's like Katrina and Jack Osborne.
Oh, yeah.
Katrina does that too. Just like, hey, it's cold here. I'm wearing a jacket.
They're very regular people, which is cool.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a great episode, and meaning that it's absolutely crazy and fun. And there is like poetry involved in it, witch poetry. There's all kinds of stuff involved. There's at the end there is some witch chanting, and
and they
Yeah.
got the nephew or the
Great nephew.
great nephew of Harry Houdini to come and be part of the seance as like a blood connection.
and he kind of looks like Houdini too.
He kind of does.
He does.
Yeah.
That's very funny. Also, the poetry. You said there's witch poetry. Does Zach read it? Because his dramatic readings, his attempts at being poetic are so bad. I mean, obviously, he's a good actor in a particular way because that is his whole shtick, is being melodramatic. But, like, he cannot read a poem to save his life.
Yeah, no, don't worry. It's not him. It's Patty Negri.
Yeah, it's Patty Negri.
Okay.
You do know that Zach has a music album, right?
Oh, no.
Isn't it new metal?
I'm pretty sure it's a metal album.
Well,
Yeah.
of course it's
Yeah,
metal. It would be
that's-
off-brand for him to do anything else.
Like pop, like K-pop? Although I would see him.
Dance-based K-pop.
In his younger years, I could see him doing K-pop, actually. We're slaying monsters. That's right. And we've got Maddie J across the table.
Hey.
We got Katie.
Hello.
And I'm EJ. And we're gonna round up some Forteans for you.
Yeah, it's time for the Fortean Roundup, where we talk about all of the best Fortean news from the last month and what we think of it. This was a very, very full month, actually. I was kind of surprised. A lot of times it starts out slow, and then we kind of ramp up toward the end. And this, we had it throughout the entire month. So, yeah. Want to jump into it?
Yeah, let's get started.
Cool. We can just start at the top, I think. There was a incident at a New Jersey auto body shop where an unexplained object crashed through the ceiling of the shop into it. This is pretty wild. This is around 2:30 a.m., April 9th. In the town of Magnolia, New Jersey, residents were awakened to a crash. And when Sebastian Leonardo arrived at work, he found that there was a huge hole in the roof of his auto body shop. Whatever it was traveling with enough force to dent a steel gauge box inside the shop. And when they reviewed the CCTV footage from the cameras that he had in there, you can actually see a fireball flash through the ceiling into the main room of the shop. It's really kind of terrifying. I'm glad that no one was there because I don't know what would have happened to them.
Looks like it shook things too. Like it was enough of an impact to shake. When I was looking at other CCTV footage around the neighborhood, you could like see the cameras jostling. So it wasn't like just the immediate area was not impacted by that shock. It was like a little bit around it too. Must have
Yeah.
been something crazy.
Yeah.
And didn't the article say that it wasn't just the bang that woke people up? Like it was a flash. Like there was a big flash of light that woke people up as well.
Yeah, it's like a fireball. It's
Yeah.
really freaky.
Yeah, and I guess my question is, did they ever find an object?
Yeah, that was
That's
my
so
question
weird
too.
to
Not at least not when the article was written. So I don't know if it maybe broke apart when it impacted, or if maybe that it was just small enough that they haven't found it. I mean, if you think about it, like it doesn't necessarily need to be a basketball or like a baseball size thing if it's traveling far enough. It could just be a marble or like a very small object because it's entering the atmosphere. That's a long way to fall. That's a lot of momentum to gain.
Crazy bullet.
Yeah.
Could it be ice that just melted?
I think if it was ice, it would have melted inside in the atmosphere before it made it that far.
Because it was hot. It looked
Yeah.
like it was a hot object too.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
Because there was a fireball. So I think
true.
it was probably like iron or rock. If it was rock, it would make sense that it just kind of broke apart and then, there might be tiny little fragments of rock in his shop, but I don't know that you would notice that necessarily.
Yeah, that was my immediate thought. Was probably an asteroid broke apart, or it wasn't very big to begin with. It makes the most sense. I mean, it would be flaming like that, most likely, and it would make a huge bang because it would have enough force to like go through the roof. I guess an outstanding question for me is like, could the bang have come from breaking some sort of sound barrier or something like that? No, it probably just came from like hitting the roof, right? That was probably what the sound was.
Probably.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it would be an explosion, basically. And I'm thinking, like, one time when I was a kid, like a teenager, someone's, like, gas canister blew up in their garage in a neighborhood on the other side of town. It made a huge sound and, like, shook everything. Everyone in the town was like, what just happened? That kind of force, that kind of explosion, like, it really radiates out.
It does. Remember that one time there was a gas explosion at somebody's mansion miles away from here, and everybody heard it? Mm-hmm. It was like this bang, huge boom. I mean, it doesn't take much, I guess. And this busting through a roof and floors and into an auto body shop with a lot of metal and crap, it's going to make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think this object doesn't have to be very big. So the fact that they haven't found it, in air quotes, doesn't mean that it was some kind of like extraterrestrial. Well, it was probably extraterrestrial in that it was probably an asteroid from outer space, but like it's probably not paranormal.
Probably not. It's probably just E.T.'s baseball.
Yeah, E.T.'s baseball. To the credit of the reporters and everything, I didn't see a whole lot about like whether this was connected to UFOs or anything like that. Although some people did try to make a connection to the drone flap from
interesting.
December of last year, although it makes absolutely no sense to assume that this is in any way connected to the drone flap.
Well, they're both in New Jersey, so that's how they're...
That's exactly what happened.
There you go.
Yeah. You just hear that New Jersey and you're like, oh yeah, all the drones that we don't talk about anymore.
Right.
Because turns out they were just authorized drones flying around.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, and I guess you can kind of see how if it didn't hit a shop, if you just saw it moving and it was moving like that fireball, and you didn't know what it was, maybe from a distance, I could see how somebody might misconstrue that as a spacecraft, like a glowing spacecraft traveling across the sky. Mm-hmm. So it gives you some context for maybe some of the UFO reporting that we see sometimes.
It definitely does, yeah.
You want to talk about dire wolves?
Yes.
And the science of this article and some of the critiques of this article as well. So this was really big news, I think, that Colossal Bioscience have made 3 direwolf puppies. Direwolves apparently lived about 10,000 years ago, and they were these larger, stronger wolves than our regular canines, like our dogs or the Arctic wolves that you see today. And they had a very, very powerful bite. And this company, Colossal Bioscience, used gene and editing technology and were able to clone what they are calling a direwolf. And they did this through combining extinct direwolf DNA and modern gray wolf DNA. So they're actually kind of a hybrid species, not a direwolf, like purebred direwolf. And they're also really, really fucking cute.
So cute. So fluffy.
So fluffy.
Yeah, and apparently the gray wolf shares a lot of DNA with like the original dire wolf. They're like its closest relative. So that's why they combined it with the gray wolf. The science in this was kind of wild. I actually thought the article did a really good job of like breaking it down simply as possible for like the layperson. But first off, the debate that is going to be had that they talk about in the article is like, can you actually call this a dire wolf? Or is it a wolf that closely resembles a dire wolf? Like you've bred it to have the traits of a dire wolf. What did they say? The phenotype? It has the phenotype of a dire wolf. Looks like one. But like, is it actually? And then there's the second larger question, which they don't really get into in the article, which is, should we fucking be doing this?
Yeah.
Which is the whole thing I was thinking the entire time I was reading this article. Despite having really cute puppies and like fluffy puppies, I was like, the goal of this company is to reintroduce these animals into ecosystems, into habitats. They're not going to just like keep them forever on their large but still like isolated and enclosed ranch. They want to reintroduce them to the wild. And the person they were talking to, I think he was a professor in Montana, was like, well, we're having a problem keeping healthy gray wolf populations because of the politics of it. So like, where are we going to put a population of dire wolves? And I think that's a really good question. Like, part of the reason animals go extinct is habitat. It's not just, they stop breeding or they get overwhelmed by a larger predator or something like that.
And evolution has happened between now and then anyway. I know that a couple of years ago, Colossal Bioscience, when they first really hit the headlines, they were talking about cloning a mammoth and how that was their like ultimate end goal, which I think it still is. But the problem is we don't have an ecosystem that can support a mammoth at all at this point. It just doesn't exist. And the same deal, if you start introducing packs of dire wolves, there's the chance that they are now simply an invasive species and they will overtake the same way that you can't just plop, a regular animal from a different place. You can't take an Arctic wolf and drop it in the middle of Texas and expect it to survive just the way any other Arctic wolf would, and not take over that place. So there's a real question. I think it's cool that we can study it. I think it's cool that we have the opportunity to see these animals that we may not have had the chance to really in-depthly explore their biology and their behavior and all of that. But then what do you do? They're real. They're not computer models. They're real. What do you do with them after that?
I think that it's foolish and it's cruel to the animals. And I think that the other aspect of this is these dire wolves have not grown up in other dire wolf communities.
Right.
So you're basically putting these poor things out into the wild. Let's say that's the end goal. Mm-hmm. But they're not going to be the same kinds of dire wolves that were around 10,000 years ago. So you got an uphill battle on so many different levels. Yeah, like the environment, the habitat, there's more people, there's buildings, there's cars. I mean, God, it's just going to be... And that's where the cruel aspect comes in, I think, because these wolves are probably going to get hit by cars or poached or put in captivity as pets. Like, I don't know. I just think that just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Ian Malcolm, right?
I got to invoke the Ian Malcolm. Yeah. That's my take on it. They're adorable. They're cute. And I just, I'm happy that they're here and adorable. But also, I'm not happy that they are.
Yeah.
I think it's just cruel to them.
Yeah, I agree, Jay. And when they said that, like, they're familiar with people, but they're not tame, like, they're not trying to, like, make them tame. And I was like, but it seems like they sort of, like, nurse them and then just put them out in this big open space and we're like, you go do your thing. They're not trying to, like, interact with them a lot. But there's only 3 of them. Who are these wolves interacting with other than themselves and human beings? Like you said, EJ, I mean, perhaps... you could introduce them to like a gray wolf pack or something like that. And those are close relatives. They could be absorbed. We see all the time that certain animals will like absorb other animals into their packs and things like that. Mm-hmm. So that's possible. I just don't see the point, the larger point. I get why it's interesting scientifically, but like, these are living creatures that then have to live out their lives. They're not just robots that we're like, oh, cool, we can like study this without any results afterward to the animal in question. On a positive note, the piece that I found interesting about the science was they were talking about how this could help us to conserve the animals that currently exist that are struggling.
Yes.
Because it could make it easier to help, shore up populations and that kind of thing with this cloning technology and sort of help the animals maintain their populations, help them breed a little bit better. But like that still doesn't answer the bigger question, which is some of these animals are going extinct because they don't have the habitats anymore. Their habitats are being encroached upon. That is a bigger problem that needs more cooperation. You can't clone your way out of climate change, out of human encroachment upon forested areas, business encroachment upon forested areas where, there might be like mining or digging or other things that are like messing up the habitat that these creatures are living in. So like when you step back, I don't understand what the point of this is beyond like not to be reductive. These people seem smart and like they know what they're doing and they're trying to be responsible. But like, I don't see the point beyond like human hubris of like, oh my God, we could make this like really cool animal that we know existed in the past and we want to fucking see it because we're humans and we have to get everything we want or something,
That's certainly what it seems like.
And I'm sorry, dude. I saw that movie. It ends with the dinosaurs escaping and eating the guy on the toilet. Like it's not good. It doesn't end well.
Yeah.
If you really want, if it's really about conservation, if that's like the end goal, clone a giant panda. Clone something that is currently living, has a current habitat, but is endangered, and we're trying to preserve them before they're all gone.
White rhinos?
Yeah, something like that. Instead of a creature
Elephants?
that is gone. Is already extinct, has been extinct for a long time, and is going to have an uphill struggle as you try to reintroduce a population, or is going to make it extremely challenging for existing populations to survive with it.
Yeah, here's the interesting thing I think is at least the white rhino has some habitat and the elephant has habitat.
Yeah.
The direwolf, realistically speaking, there is no habitat on this planet for the direwolf.
There hasn't been for 10,000 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge oversight is that it's changed too much.
Right.
Yes. And the woolly mammoth one is particularly like, where the fuck are you putting these animals exactly?
We don't even have the climate for it.
No, it was a completely different climate when woolly mammoths, like, okay, you're going to go stick them in Greenland? Like, I don't know. Poor Greenland. We're just using them for everything.
I know, yeah.
But honestly, where are you going to put them? Sometimes things happen and we get to read about them and we get to say that's cool, but we don't get to experience it, and that is okay. That is called existentialism. That is called
It's impermanence.
Impermanence, exactly. I really am anti this whole project.
Yeah, me
on a
too.
bigger level.
Things are special because they don't last forever. Our life is special because it ends. And I think if we start to think, oh, oopsie, I accidentally over-industrialized the country and killed all the animals, I guess I'll just bring them back with technology. No, that's not a good lesson to learn. The lesson to learn is to conserve what we have.
It makes for a terrifying prospect, actually, because it is... You can continue industrialization. If we lose something, we'll just use science to bring it back.
Yeah,
we don't need
matter.
to worry about conservation. It kind of invalidates the whole conservation argument. And admittedly, I don't expect colossal bioscience to solve that. Like, I don't expect them to solve climate change, but
We have to solve it. It's a human problem, and as humans we all need to solve it. I do believe people can chew gum and walk at the same time. Like you can do these both things. It's not really about that. It's just is the habitat there at all? No, it's not. Maybe we should focus on animals, like you said, that need to be saved right now.
also you're going to end up with very, very rich people who own dire wolves because they can afford to order a cloned dire wolf. And that's really a fucked up scenario.
Yeah.
But they're cute.
They're
fluffy.
very cute. They're so sweet.
They're very fluffy. They're all white, too. They're really cute.
I know. Oh my God. I know. The video of them, the two older male ones running around and playing, I was like, oh, kill me now. I just want to look at your like fluffy little face. I just want to squish it. And I'm like, that is not what that animal is for. but
No, it's not.
We should be terrified of these creatures that we are we are so removed from the reality of the harshness of nature that we're like, ooh, I can put it in a little bandana and walk it around with me in New York City.
yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah. In a Loch Ness update this month, we haven't found the monster, but we found a pretty cool relic from one of the monster hunts. I can't believe I'm saying this sentence out loud, but the submarine Boaty McBoatface found something unusual in Loch Ness. They found a long-lost trap camera. So in the 1960s and 70s, we talked about this during the Doc Shields episode, there was this renewed interest in the Loch Ness Monster. And a professor named Roy P. McCall conducted a survey of Loch Ness. Now, McCall was very heavily invested in cryptozoology, and he was a contemporary of our founders of cryptozoology, Bernard Heuvelmans and Ivan T. Sanderson. And McCall helped to found the International Society for Cryptozoology, and he was one of the big proponents to try to push the science and make it a very legitimate science. His investigations at Loch Ness involved creating these early trap cameras. They were Instamatic cameras with motion-triggered flashes. He never got anything worthwhile off of them, but he still was convinced that there was something there and something worth photographing. Apparently, several of them were lost during a storm or a gale, and this one was recovered after Boaty McBoatface got caught on its cable. Whereupon they brought it to the surface, and Loch Ness researcher Adrian Shine was able to identify it as one of McCall's long-lost cameras. So I thought this was pretty cool.
So cool. I remember when they had that competition, and Boaty
McBoatface,
yes,
yeah.
and Boaty McBoatface won, and the British government was like, no. We will not be naming our Royal Navy ship Boaty McBoatface. But they were like, you can have a little submarine robot.
And everybody learned a very important lesson about the internet that day.
Yes, and a lesson they should have already known, but fair enough. It's never too late to relearn something.
That's right. Oh my God. My big takeaway from this story is that they found this tiny little camera at the bottom of Loch Ness, but they still can't find Nessie.
Yeah, they didn't talk a whole lot about that, but that's a pretty good takeaway, because theoretically, when we talk about the Loch Ness Monster, we don't talk about a creature that is the size of a brook trout. We're talking about something that is a monster size. Like, people talk about it being a plesiosaur. That would be 50 feet long, like gigantic. And yeah, we found the camera, but we can't find the plesiosaur.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, EJ. I didn't think of that. But you can find a tiny Instamatic camera on the bottom of Loch Ness.
I mean, what are the chances?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild that it happened at all. There was a movie about the Loch Ness Monster that was filmed in the 1970s. It was a Sherlock Holmes movie where he went to Loch Ness and investigated the monster. And they had a full-sized Nessie prop that they used for it, that were floating around the loch, and at one point it broke away and sank. And we have found the Nessie prop, but we've never found the Nessie monster, like the real monster. Mm. And the Nessie prop is full-sized. So, again, to your point,
wow.
I think, although the loch is huge, it's 20-some miles long, it's hundreds of feet deep, but we have a pretty good sense of what's going on down there.
Mm-hmm. Also, it's been studied for so long. It is a limited space. At the end of the day, it is a limited space. It's not like the ocean, right?
You're right.
Never mind the fact that plesiosaurs, assuming that Nessie is a plesiosaur, they were air breathers, which means that they'd be like whales or dolphins. If they were around, especially in that tiny little loch, because it's relatively tiny, we're not talking about the entire ocean or something, you would see them surface a lot. A lot more than what we see now.
we see whales. Whales are also enormous. I mean, they don't swim in the whole ocean, right? They have their like pathways and places that they go. But still, like, we see whales like pretty often. They are enormous creatures that live in giant bodies of water. But somehow we haven't seen an enormous creature that lives in a constricted body of water.
Right.
Yeah, when you think about it, it just, I mean, I don't know. All those things combined. And then at this point, also, wouldn't there be a family? Like, wouldn't there be a breeding population?
Yeah,
I guess?
there would need to be a breeding population in Loch Ness. There can't just be one monster unless the monster's immortal.
Right. So in that case, the likelihood of seeing them breach for air would be extremely high and common, I would imagine.
And that raises a whole bunch of other complications. This goes along with a lot of cryptids where you have the breeding population issue, like Bigfoot, where, okay, if you have breeding populations, then you also have animals dying, which means that you should have corpses. Now, I understand that that's, it's a lake and things sink to the bottom and stuff, and corpses will get eaten and all of that. But again, over the 100-odd years that we've been talking about this story, it still seems like you should have found something, and in that case, there still should be evidence of some type of animal there in corpse form.
Yes.
So there was a point where a Loch Ness investigator claimed to have found a tooth from the Loch Ness monster, I believe in like it was early 2000s. But that was just a publicity stunt for a movie.
Sure. I mean, unless Nessie is like a sea turtle. She just lives a really long time, so we're still on just the one.
Roy P. McCall was convinced that Nessie was an existing species of prehistoric whale.
Oh, okay.
But there again, there are not whales in Loch Ness. So,
and how would it have gotten there?
We have talked about that a little bit.
We have talked about that. Loch Ness is interesting because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense how anything of that size could have gotten there. It's a freshwater lake, and it was created through glacial movement. It's not like it was connected to the ocean at some point, and then that channel was sealed off. So we wouldn't have ocean-dwelling creatures in Loch Ness because there's just no way for them to get there unless somebody physically picked one up and dropped it in Loch Ness.
Right. And then there's that guy that thought there are like the underground channels or whatever. The caverns.
Yeah, that was Tim Dinsdale who thought that they were traveling back and forth.
That seems unlikely, right?
It's very unlikely, and that institutes a whole other set of problems where you have to now the Loch Ness monster not only needs to be able to do all that travel underwater, but and the channels have to be big enough for it, but also you need a monster that that can survive in both freshwater and saltwater, which isn't unheard of. We talked about this before, and a listener had corrected me because I think I erroneously said that there weren't fish that do that, but there are some fish that do. Like I want to say salmon, I think, can live in freshwater and saltwater. But irrelevantly, now that's an even smaller population. And again, that goes against all the things that we believe about plesiosaurs existing to begin with. Also, plesiosaurs, I'm pretty sure, were warm water animals because the planet was much warmer at the time. Okay,
so I just did a quick Google search. They're referred to as euryhaline, EURYHALINE fish. Okay. Notable examples are salmon, American eels, and bull sharks. And some fish can also live in like more brackish waters. So maybe not completely salt water, but they can like transition to more brackish waters. This is what Google says. So yes, is possible, but it doesn't seem, these are all like much smaller animals.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is one of those instances where in order to justify what you're believing, you have to put all of these what ifs on it. It's like, well, what if it's this? We have a little evidence of this. And then what if it's this? And what if it's this? And eventually you have this sort of precarious tower that you've built to support your idea that there is a plesiosaur living in Loch Ness. Whereas it's much more likely to be like, some people just make mistakes and they see seals and eels and think that those are big monsters sometimes.
Yeah,
you know?
It's Occam's razor, which for our listeners who don't know is the problem-solving idea that the simplest answer is usually the correct one. So when you start to have to add in layers and layers and layers of explanation to something, you're probably not on the right track.
Right. But I think it's getting back to this news item. I think it's pretty cool that we found that camera. It's always cool to see some of these relics come up. And if you want to see the camera for yourself, it is in the Loch Ness Museum in, here we go, Drumnadrochit.
Wow, I'm sure that's how they say it in Scotland.
Drumnadrochit.
We got to get you to Scotland so that you can learn how to pronounce these things for real.
I want to go to Scotland.
Yeah.
I want to go to Scotland. I want to fish in Loch Ness and see if I can catch myself a monster. Yeah, let's everybody, let's give a thank you to Bodie McBoatface this month because they did a great job.
Yeah, good job, Bodie McBoatface.
Good job, Bodie. You did a good job.
Hey.
Okay, so the Daily Mail reported two articles that we're going to talk about here this month. But this first one is that there was an alien massacre, meaning that aliens got shot down in somewhere in Ukraine, and then in retaliation, the aliens turned a bunch of soldiers into stone. And maybe we still have the craft and a whole bunch of other bullshit that was here. So according to this article, Soviet troops shot down a UFO, crashed aliens, unleashed some type of technology or magic or something that turned the investigating troops to stone. This took place sometime between 1989 and 1990 and was reported on a document released in 2000. The Daily Mail article called this shocking and extraordinary, although the only thing actually shocking and extraordinary is the Daily Mail's complete lack of journalistic rigor. If you read anything about this incident, including the article, it was first reported in the Ukrainian newspaper Holos Ukraini, which sources a Canadian newspaper. Did you see what that Canadian newspaper was?
No.
It was the Weekly World News.
Oh, come on.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the same tabloid that had headlines about Bat Boy and overfishing and endangering the mermaid population. So,
Okay. So the Weekly World News made something up. I was not good enough at clicking through the links to figure out the Weekly World News thing. My first thought was the Soviets accidentally exploded some kind of nuclear device on their own soldiers and made a weird alien story up to try to pretend that they didn't do that.
that's the funny thing is that's not out of the realm of possibility either.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like that was my first thought because I did not look any of this up. So take all of what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. But my memory is that when we dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, like the effects on people that were like in the immediate blast radius was that they basically were like frozen in place. Like it turned their bodies into another substance. And I think it says in this article that like that can happen from a radiation blast. That was my first thought because I was like, oh, I wonder if this is what happened. And then they were just making shit up because, you know, Russia still makes shit up, but they were really making shit up during and like right after the Soviet era. But the World Weekly News, that makes way more sense that it was all just made up from the beginning. Like nothing ever even happened.
Yeah, it's actually it's funny because it's right here in this very authoritative looking block lettering, and I'm going to use the same word. This is as reported by the authoritative magazine Canadian Weekly World News.
You have to call yourself authoritative for people to believe it.
Right.
Can we call Slaying Monsters the authoritative Fortean history podcast?
I think we can.
So, Katie, I know that I'm going to get absolutely destroyed by all of the scientists who listen to our podcast, but there is something about when an atomic blast happens, it will turn sand to glass because of, I think, the superheat. And that was something that they talked about a lot in Ancient Aliens, because I believe there are references to something similar to that in the Mahabharata. And they point to that being, the Mahabharata was talking about an atomic energy weapon that was used and observed from some alien craft.
I think that's right, because my reference is Sweet Home Alabama, the movie. But in that movie, the main character, the love interest, he makes lightning glass, because when lightning hits sand, it turns it into glass, or it turns it into liquid that you can then extract and make into glass. So yeah, that's true, that when extreme heat hits sand, it turns into glass. See, authoritative. We are authoritative. The authoritative reference, Sweet Home Alabama.
We list our sources today. I'll just say that it's important to look at the source of a source.
I actually 100% agree, EJ. I think that is the thing to take away from here, is that you might be reading a source that seems definitive, but it is really important to look at what that person is citing to say what they're saying.
Yeah, and this kind of block lettering really does make everything look very official. So I can understand why at first glance everybody's like, oh, why would they be saying something why would the government be saying something so fantastical? Well, if you look into it, the government didn't say anything fantastical. This is all just a tabloid article.
And in our second Daily Mail news outing, news in these big block quotation marks, apparently the CIA knows where the Ark of the Covenant is. So get your whips and your fedoras ready, because we're going back in time. All right.
Oh, so this article.
Yeah.
According to this article, CIA remote viewers in the 1980s successfully identified the location of the Ark of the Covenant. And this comes from a memo from Project Sunstreak, which was a sister program to Project Stargate. We've talked about Project Stargate before, but in the 1970s and 80s, Hal Puthoff and Russell Targe tested people claiming to be psychics with the intention of using them as CIA operatives. The thinking was that they could remote view and collect information about targets and locations without ever being there physically. This whole project was canceled in the 90s after psychologist Professor Ray Hyman reviewed their findings and concluded that there was nothing happening beyond random chance. We also talked about how a lot of these people were just magicians and mentalists who were essentially performing magic tricks in closed rooms, and the researchers were taking these as successes. Stargate and Sunstreak tested these psychics, like Uri Geller, psychics in quotation marks again. Remember, Geller was proved to be a fraud by James Randi multiple times. The projects took $10 million of taxpayer money before Ray Hyman's report finally convinced the government, hey, stop spending money on this stupid shit. So the other hilarious part of this is that the Ark of the Covenant may not have even existed, and if it did, it was probably destroyed. And we talked about this during our Oak Island series, but supposedly the true Ark of the Covenant, if it existed, was housed in King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. When Jerusalem was sacked in 587 BC by the Neo-Babylonians, the city was destroyed with King Solomon's temple along with it. Some stories claim that a secret group whisked the Ark of the Covenant away before Jerusalem fell. In these stories, it's often linked to the Knights Templar, who have allegedly been guarding the final resting place in secret for, hundreds and hundreds of years. Some stories even claim that it ended up on an island off the coast of Nova Scotia and is currently under the purview of brothers Rick and Marty Lagina, their partner Craig Tester, and Dave Blankenship.
Along with...
Katie, have you watched Oak Island at all?
No.
Okay. One of the most hilarious parts of Oak Island is that the narrator, it's the same narrator from Ancient Aliens.
Okay.
So that voice in your head. But the script always has him relating all of the names, like everybody who's in the room, he's always like, so gathered together are brothers Rick and Marty Lagina, their partner Craig Tester, Jack Bagley, and Oak Island resident Dave Blankenship. And so he'll like list out all of the people that are there.
Oh my God. Okay.
So, yeah.
That's funny. No, I should watch this. This is a show?
Oh yeah, there are 11 seasons of ridiculousness.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll add it to the list.
It's an interesting show. Not a whole lot happens, but there are a couple of instances where they do some really cool archaeological finds. And, the history of Oak Island is fascinating. We did some 5 hours on it back in the day. But yeah, I'd recommend it. The characters are great. Getting back to our history, it's important to know that King Solomon and his temple, they might not have existed at all. Historians point out that there's no evidence of any construction projects, temples or otherwise, with King Solomon's name attached to them. And there are no physical remains of the temple, not even a sherd of pottery. So it's possible that King Solomon never existed. And if that's the case, the Ark was never in his temple because the temple never existed. So who knows? All of that is to say that I'm not sure that remote viewers who can't really do anything beyond random chance actually found the location of an item that may or may not have been real and may or may not have been destroyed.
There's a lot there.
Just taking the article at face value, when I was reading it, I just felt, well, one, I was like, okay, remote viewing, blah-de-blah, psychic reading. Can't believe the government thought this was real.
They did.
Secondly, the information that this person relayed that's in this document was so general.
Yes.
We know where it is, and you're saying the Middle East. That's
Surprise.
that's not knowing where it is. And also, if it existed at all, yes, that seems logical, given that that's where it was to begin with. And the sketches of, I'm like, this is not a sketch. This is a vague outline that a kindergartner could do. Then the last piece of it that just really pushed me over the edge was the whole it's guarded and anyone who tries to open it will be destroyed. I'm like, are we in a fucking movie? What are you talking about? Let's just put aside the fact that all of it isn't real for a second and say that perhaps it was, and this person really was seeing an archaeological site and was trying to describe it so that people could go there. You might be able to say something like, I'm getting a bad feeling. It seems like it's guarded, heavily guarded, right? Okay, that's something that happens in the real world. Anyone who tries to open it will be destroyed. Okay, no. Now you're talking about fantasy, magical, fictional things that you've now just inserted into your vision that's supposed to be real. It's just so frustrating. Again, these people aren't real. It's so annoying that they can't even try to pretend to be real. They always have to push it too far. It's I thought that your whole job is being a storyteller. You don't know when to stop. You don't know when to like cut yourself off?
First off, remote viewing and a lot of this mentalism and stuff. Yeah, this is like a tenet of magic. It works because of the generality. Whenever
Yes.
whenever you see a mentalist, a magician performing feats of mentalism, they never start their show by being like, I'm getting a name. That name is Rutherford Eugene Harris IV. They're always like, I'm getting a name. I think it starts with R. And then they kind of extrapolate from there. So you cast a very wide net. And you cast a net that people can put their own perceptions and their own opinions on. So yeah, right? You go, oh, it's in the Middle East. And then you're like, oh, it's in a vaguely triangular shaped building. And like, yeah, okay, dude. So yeah, there's lots of buildings, so
I'm seeing mosques around. Okay, you're probably in a
Exactly,
Muslim
right, yeah.
country. That makes sense. Yeah. People are wearing white. Yup, again, makes sense. Like all
Right,
facts
yeah.
about the world that everyone knows. Like
So that's one of the things. But then I wonder if it is useful for a remote viewer who knows that they're bullshit, or is at least concerned that they're might be found out at some point, to then say, oh, there's a curse. Oh, be really careful if you go there, to try to convince people not to go there, not to look for it. Because that way you can't be wrong.
Or go where? Vaguely in the Middle East?
Yeah, don't go vaguely in the Middle East.
Like, now we are to believe that the Ark of the Covenant holds the tablets, right? The 10 Commandments?
Right, that's the
Okay.
idea, yes.
All right. So my issue with this, and maybe I'm just not religious enough for this, but we have to believe that the 10 Commandments exist.
Right.
And we have to believe that God gave them to Moses.
Right.
And there's a lot of pipe laid out here. And I just don't know. You're asking me first to believe in a Christian God and the Christian Bible literally. That's a lot to ask people who might not believe in those things. So you're basically saying in this remote viewing that all of this Bible stuff is literally true, which is a huge thing. The U.S. government definitely has, I think, a religious reason to be in the Middle East, like a Christian reason to be there and to care about it. And so this is the kind of stuff that's not surprising to hear.
Oh, I'm sure they jumped on this idea because it does support that. And it's another one of those little cracks that you can insinuate dogma into that could eventually become a bigger crack, because if we find the Ark of the Covenant, like you said, EJ, then theoretically we find the 10 Commandments. And if we find the 10 Commandments, then it proves that Moses was real. And if we find them, we prove that God exists because God gave the 10 Commandments. All of these things, right?
that's interesting. I mean, I think you also grew up in the church, EJ, but
Yeah.
for me, what's fascinating about that take is that, like, I actually don't think any of this history being real, like, proves that God is real. I forget exactly which biblical characters we know to be real and not real. We do know that some of them are real. For example,
Yes.
right? We know that Jesus was a real dude, like, chilling, doing stuff.
I'm not 100% convinced that was true. Just for the record, I don't know if Jesus was officially a real person. I think that it might still be debated.
I'm happy. It's very possible it's still being debated, but there is some historical evidence that he was like an actual person who claimed to be a leader or prophet or whatever. And that, he lived on the earth. Like, he isn't just like a completely made up guy, right?
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
Not that he like did any of these things, but that like he was an actual man who who was around.
Sure.
And that's true with, like, I think some of the apostles, like, that they were actual religious
Luke was real,
leaders.
apparently.
Yeah, that, like, were
King
around.
Nebuchadnezzar,
Some of the kings, like, these, like, some of this stuff is based on actual historical things that we can pinpoint relatively. That makes sense, right? They were creating a new religion to, like, subdue a group of people. And
For sure.
Yep.
like,
Yeah,
it makes
right.
sense that some of these people actually existed and are part of these stories in certain ways. But, like, how does that get you to God? Like, I don't think that it does. And so but I do think that you're all very right, and I didn't think of it this way, that having these types of stories are, like, very convenient ways for religion to, like, reinsert itself as, like, a powerful thing. Like, oh, we might have actually found this thing that has all this religious meaning. And for me, a non-religious person who does know the history of it, I'm like, okay, sure, yeah, maybe the Ark of the Covenant existed and they put the things in there that they said that were from God. Like,
Right.
that doesn't mean that they are.
I think I've talked about this a little bit before on the podcast, but I think that there is a sense in I'll specifically talk about like Christian, particularly evangelical, but it might be true across all religions. I'm not entirely sure, but I notice it mostly in the evangelical Christianity that it's this thinking that if you undermine one aspect of the Bible, which was spoken and written down, the Word of God, it undermines all of the Bible. So essentially, you can't invalidate one thing without invalidating the whole thing, and that logic gets ported over to science and to rationality from their perspective. And I think that's why when you see, oh, well, if we find the Ark of the Covenant, to that mindset, that evangelical mindset, if we find the Ark of the Covenant, that proves God because that invalidates the scientific argument or the archaeological argument that God didn't exist. And so to them, the slippery slope runs both ways. That's not how science actually works. If we find the Ark of the Covenant, or if we find a different type of missing link or a ancient species that we think was extinct, that doesn't invalidate all of the science of evolution or archaeology. We just change our model and we say, oh, well, we were right about some things, we were wrong about other things, and it evolves. But to them, they see it as first an inroad and then a complete undermine and invalidation that can kneecap science entirely. And so,
Yes.
to me, that's the mindset that I think says, well, if we find the Ark of the Covenant, boom, Bible's real, everybody's going to church again.
Yes. Yeah, even though we don't see it that way, that is what the majority of people that are handling this, and many, many, many Americans see it that way.
Right.
The thing that I find dangerous about this, all those points added to that, we have the CIA conducting these tests, apparently, right? People think, oh, because the CIA are conducting these tests, well, then there must be some truth and validity to what's happening.
Right.
And so we're giving an authoritative body too much credit by saying, oh, this must be legitimate. And that's just argument from authority fallacy. So there's a lot of things going on here that are red flags to me, and that's definitely one of them.
One of the aspects of Project Stargate was the idea they were testing if people could walk through walls, basically. If they could alter their chemical composition, their matter composition, and be able to pass through walls. They can't. Just because the CIA has done something does not mean that it's fucking good science or good research or anything like that. People are dumb. People are dumb across all spectrums.
Yeah.
Well, they had to try because, if you could figure out that people could walk through walls for $10 million, that would have been a small price to pay.
I mean,
For
and
the
that's
military,
true.
for the military advantage of that.
For sure. I mean, can you imagine like a clandestine operations if you could just walk through walls? It'd be incredible. But
Also, you don't need $10 million of taxpayer money. I mean, ask any kid, have you been able to teleport anything, levitate, walk through a wall, jump off a staircase. I mean, ask any kid, because this is what kids do. I jumped off a staircase when I was a kid because I thought that I could fly. I found out that I cannot fly. So I think that we're just doing this all wrong, personally.
Yeah.
Kids will do these things.
Yeah, kids have already been trying. It's kind of like in Harry Potter, how the kids at the beginning, like some of the kids who are in the Muggle world who have magical powers, they don't know. They're just doing things. They're just things are happening and they're trying things out and it's just happening. I feel like if you read any sci-fi novel about these types of things like ESP or whatever, kids don't know they have it. They can just do it. So I feel like if these things were possible, even just amongst a small subset of the population, like EJ said, it would just be happening when kids are playing. And then we'd have to like capture those kids and be like, oh, turns out you are special. We need to take you to the special school. But like
Professor X's school.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it's real life X-Men. Yeah.
I feel like you're so right, EJ. Like if these things were possible and some people had those capabilities, they would be coming out just with kids playing with each other.
In our final news story today, we have to ask the question, have we finally found proof of life on other planets? No is the answer to that question, but let's talk about it anyway. So this was a headline for, I'd say, the hot minute this month, and got a good amount of press surrounding it. But astronomers from the University of Cambridge claim that they have found the latest best proof of interstellar life, which is an exoplanet that allegedly has an ocean, quote, teeming with life. And the claim here is that the data collected from the Kepler Space Telescope indicated that this planet, K2-18b, shows evidence of marine algae. They say that they have found a molecule that is only produced by living algae on Earth. Therefore, if it's found on another planet, we can assume that there is algae there. So they haven't actually found the algae itself, but what they found is a molecule that's produced by the algae. And they're saying, okay, this is an indication that there should be life in the form of that algae on this planet. There's a lot of issues with all of this. It seems like every year we get some kind of revolutionary discovery that's going to finally prove that there's life on other planets. And then it just kind of gets dropped because it's a mistake, or the biosigns that they thought were produced by other processes, or they weren't detectable again, or something like that. Mm-hmm. The problem with this, to me, is that the quote, aliens found on other planet, it's a great headline, and that's often what gets reported, but there's a gigantic gulf of nuance that gets missed or downplayed in this quest for, you know, your news subscribers, eyeballs, or more funding for your research or whatever. People don't put money behind a group of scientists who say, we found some trace elements of something that might not indicate that there's a biosignature of life, but they actually might. You know, you get a lot more funding by saying, holy shit, look at the aliens over there. They're playing space Tetris.
Yeah, I disagree.
Oh, go for it. Yeah, what's up?
No, I mean, well, first off, I think maybe the New York Times said aliens over there. I don't think the scientists said that. I think the
aliens did not. No, the aliens did not. It's a reporting problem.
Yeah, I mean,
the aliens.
The aliens didn't say anything. The New York Times, yeah. No,
New York Times did not.
I just recently read a book. I'll put a plug for it in here. It's called Alien Earths, Planet Hunting in the Cosmos. It's by Lisa Kaltenegger. She is an astronomer, and she has pioneered looking for life on other planets, not intelligent life. Literally, we're talking bacteria, that kind of thing, like exactly what these scientists are reporting. And they didn't mention it in the New York Times article, but like, I wouldn't be surprised if her research was foundational to some of what they were doing here. So basically, what she started doing is creating and making a database of what all of these different molecules, bacteria, things like that look like when reflected through light in a telescope, which is like how
Fascinating.
we are looking at other planets, right? So basically she's trying to catalog all of these different things, all of these different signs of life that we find on Earth. And she's looking at like normal ones like marine algae, but also life that lives in like really extreme conditions. So like the bacteria that lives in like the sulfur pools at at Yellowstone National Park, or, you know, deep in like frozen ice where they're just like chilling. So all this stuff, she's trying to catalog it so that if we see it on another planet, that potentially there's a possibility that that planet might have some sort of life on it. And again, life defined by like bacteria, not even necessarily plants or like marine algae. Like that's going a lot further, right? The book is so fascinating. I like highly recommend that people read it. So when I read this article, I really took it as like, oh shit, like the scientists who are working on this stuff possibly found a signal from another planet that there might be life there. Because like, again, all we can do is like look at the light that's reflecting off of these planets. We don't actually know. And I think they even say in the New York Times article that like we haven't been able to look at this planet for like 12 years because of like the way it's circling around its sun or star, all this kind of stuff. So like we probably won't be able to look at it for another 12 years where we might be able to see this again. We don't know, right? And so that's where I agree with you, Matt. They saw it once. They have to do it again. There was that one woman that they interviewed, and the one scientist that they interviewed in the New York Times article, where she was like, I'm not screaming aliens, but she was like, I always reserve the right to scream aliens. And I thought that was really funny of her. This is actually the kind of like life on other planets story that I'm like, this is cool. These are like real scientists who are like really trying to figure something out. And like these folks are actually separate from the SETI folks who are looking for like intelligent life on other planets. These people are actually just trying to like find another Earth, like another planet that is habitable, which we assume there are. They're called Goldilocks planets. They're planets that are, you know, far enough away from their star, but not too far away. I think that they have a lot to do to prove that they didn't just misread something. And it sounds like they tried to already double check their work. It's so hard to say. Like you're literally looking at like light signals. So you have to try and make sure that you're not misreading the light signal, that it didn't get like deflected or reflected or like tampered with in some way. Like it's so hard. So you're also right, Matt, that it could be absolutely nothing. But I think the science behind it is actually very real. That's my plug for the story.
No, that's really fascinating. I wasn't familiar with what's her name?
Lisa Kaltenegger. She's the director of the Carl Sagan Institute at Cornell.
Cool.
I'm pretty sure it's Cornell.
Okay.
Anyway, literally, I just read this book like 2 months ago. So I didn't know any of this shit before 2 months ago. But it happens to be perfectly timed with this story coming out I had like just read this book, because I was like, oh my God, this is like the science that she was talking about that she's working on. Her and her colleagues, not just her, right? A bunch of different scientists are doing this type of work.
That's really cool. Yeah, I wasn't familiar with her work at all. It's funny because I've seen it, like you said, I think I've seen it crop up in a couple other stories where they've said, hey, we've noticed these biosignatures in particular places, and we're looking at that. It must be related to this catalog that she's creating. And I I do think that this is probably the way that we're going to find intelligent life. I don't think somebody's going to look through a telescope one day and be like, yo, there's a alien city on a planet somewhere. Like I think it's probably going to be, hey, we found a planet and we see that there are certain molecules or gases or whatever that are being produced off this planet that we can relate back to life signatures on Earth. That's one that we should try to get a closer look at.
I really think I'm a bit of a blue collar thinker. Like not that's kind of a bad way of putting it. I like things that I can touch, that are close to me, that I can take apart. And when it comes to science, this is my problem with math. Like when it comes to astronomy, I'm like, it's a little beyond my comprehension. But let's see. I will say that I did read the refutation article. I think the biggest takeaway that I took from that was that there were multiple signatures, and the biosignature that they picked up was not even necessarily a biosignature, that it could have been something else. And to assume that it was the biosignature is kind of running with something that might not be totally proven out yet.
Right.
Not that the science is bad, it's just that the interpretation of the science was a little skewed and fantastical.
And that kind of gets back to my point, which is a lot of times, and you know what, hands up, like we are among these journalists covering this. You're not a scientist, right? Like we are trying to do an interpretation of this article and talk about it and have intelligent conversations about it, but I don't fucking understand any of the science of this. And so we're doing our best to understand and interpret it, and we're going to get some things wrong. And there's a long chain of that because I don't have the knowledge to read whatever paper was initially published on that. That paper gets read by somebody who writes an article in the New York Times, and then that New York Times article gets distilled down by us on this podcast. So, we're not only are we a couple of people removed, but we're a couple fucking scientific degrees removed from what's actually happening.
Hell yeah.
Exactly.
This is the problem with podcasts in general, or like anything like this, right? It's like this is how we get Joe Rogans, where, not that we are that, but I'm just saying, like,
we are authoritative.
We are authoritative. But you give somebody a microphone but you don't see the work that they did or did not do based on what they're talking about. And so you just have to kind of just hope that they're right. So, I mean, I'll be the first to admit, astronomy ain't my thing. I don't get this stuff,
right.
But I can extrapolate from what I did read, like you're saying, like, okay, that's interesting. It can be refuted, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. For me, the piece that I was like, oh, that seems like a big claim, was when they were like, this molecule can only be created, or the signature can only be created by extensive marine algae, like, because that's why we have it in Earth's atmosphere. And what I will say, just from reading this book, is not that that's not true, could be true, but that could be our only reference. So another thing that I found so fascinating in this book is that a lot of our knowledge of exoplanets, of how different galaxies form, we've learned a lot in the last 20 years, might be even fewer years than that, like literally might be since like 2010. I'm forgetting time frames in the book, but it's no earlier than like the 90s, and definitely in the 21st century, that we have learned brand new things about star formation, about galaxy formation, that like planets can exist in configurations that like we didn't actually think was possible, and they're like having to like rethink some of the science because of things we've seen and discovered, because of like better telescopes, new knowledge, like all that kind of thing. It's true that we know this molecule as being because we have oceans teeming with marine algae, but like that doesn't mean that there couldn't be another way that this signature could show up, if it is a real signature, right? Like if it hasn't been misinterpreted, which again is risk. It could be showing up because of something else that could also still be life, could be bio life, but not oceans teeming with marine algae, right? Like, it could be something way simpler. Outer space is enormous. We don't know very much about it. Like, and we are still like...
We can't.
No,
Yeah.
we can't. And we're still actively discovering new things. Always keep that in mind when you read news like this. It can sort of simultaneously be true and not true, you know, at the same time.
Yeah, or be invalidated by science that comes out next week or something like that, right? As we continue to learn all of the new findings about all of this stuff.
It could be a mistake that was made by actual valid science. They just need to keep learning more, right? It doesn't mean that the science is wrong. It just means that like people are working on this shit constantly.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and my lesson is leave it to the experts, leave it to people that know more than me, because I have strengths. Astronomy is not one of them. Space is not one of them.
My other note would be like, if you're interested in something, read about it. Or even if you're skeptical about it, but in an interested way, like go find someone who's doing the work and like read what they have to say. It's out there.
Totally. You know, if you want to get the authoritative source, listen to Slaying Monsters.
Yeah. Yeah, believe what we say religiously.
Dear God. Well, thank you all so much for listening to us, to this Fortean Roundup. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
That was
If there are any
weird. Yes.
astronomers listening that have not fully bashed their heads against the wall and still can think, please do write in.
Yeah, please, all of the scientists that listen to our show, write in and tell me all the things I got wrong.
Me too.
No, for real, though, I appreciate that. I think it's important that we do that and that we correct ourselves as we go along, because I don't want to be the Joe Rogan spouting bullshit and not know it, you know. So yeah, write in, tell me what went wrong. Write in with your spooky stories. I mean, have you encountered ghosts, cryptids, aliens? It's been a while since we've had a listener story like that, so it'd be great. Just write in. We'll read it, and as always, if you do that, no judgment. We're not going to sit here and be like, "Oh, blah, 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 couldn't have been that, couldn't have been that." We just want to know. We want to know what happens, and we want to talk about it, because I think far too often these things don't get talked about, and the more they are left in darkness, and the more we don't talk about them, the more the charlatans can take advantage of them.
Yeah. And I will just say that this is the second time in which I have had a premonition of a dream before a Slaying Monsters recording.
Oh, really?
I dreamt of wolves last night, getting hunted by wolves.
Oh.
And we talked about
That's
dire
creepy.
wolves today. So this is the second time that this has happened.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
See? There you go.
Love a story
should,
like that.
Me too. It's fun.
See if the CIA wants to run some tests on you.
Seriously, there have been. I mean, I really should. I don't really buy into this stuff, but there have been multiple times in my life and in my mom's life. They say that it runs in the family, that there have been some weird ass psychic stuff happening. Mm-hmm. I don't believe it's true. I think you can explain it all away. But if the CIA would like to hire me, I would happily take a salary. So just, get in touch. Get in touch with Slaying Monsters.
CIA, if you're listening, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com.
I'll walk through a wall for $10 million.
You're a family of witches, EJ, I think, is what you're telling me.
Clearly.
I think we are. Something like that.
Yep.
We're like bitches. All right.
All right. Thank you all so much for listening. We will be back next time with a brand new series for you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
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 Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters, the Fortean History Podcast. If you like the podcast, there's a couple ways you can show your support. You can tell your friends, you can leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform, or you can head over to slayingmonsterspodcast.com and click on the Support Us button to leave a donation. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on socials @Slaying Monsters Podcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.